The opinions expressed by the host and guests in this show are not necessarily the views of Children's Health Defense.
Well, good morning, Ph.D. Welcome to Doctors and Scientists. It is Friday, October 3rd, and straight away, I'm going to bring on my absolute favorite host in the entire universe. We've been working together in earnest since, gosh, I think before the Australia tour, right, Polly? Polly Tommey, so good to have you. So good to see you. Any day that I get to see Polly is a good day.
We are good together. Well, we've been working together for so long, and we got thrown out of Australia together.
We did. We got thrown out of Australia. There are not very many places that will accept us. Australia is not one of them. So anyhow, it was fun while it lasted. What are we talking about today?
Well, we're going to start off with acetaminophen. I want to say it like that because a lot of people are having trouble saying that word, including myself. That's why I have to write it out. Acetaminophen. Acetaminophen.
Acetaminophen, absolutely. I mean, I've been saying that word for such a long time, it sort of rolls off the tongue. And I'm dirt cheap, so we never buy anything that's brand name. So, when we used acetaminophen, which we do not use any longer, it was never the Tylenol brand. It was always the generic, the game from Walgreens or CVS or Walmart or whatever. So that's why I'm used to saying it. But it's really been big in the news regarding autism causation, and I think that it's important that we address what's going on.
Yes, especially with the science at Ph.D. But Lou has a couple of clips that neither you nor myself has seen. So let's see the clips with our viewers together and comment on them. Let's start with Paul Offit, shall we?
There was a study that was done in Sweden where they looked over a 25-year period at 2.5 million children to see whether or not Tylenol taken during pregnancy increased the risk of autism. And it didn't. And more importantly, they did it the right way because they did the so-called sibling control. So they looked at mothers who took Tylenol during one pregnancy but not another. So you could compare those two pregnancies. And again, it found that there was no relationship between taking Tylenol and developing autism.
Well, that'll be the Tylenol study sponsored by pharmaceutical industry, correct?
Correct. It was sponsored by pharmaceutical interest, and also when they look at the entire population of pregnant women in Sweden over that period of time, they did see a statistically significant increase in autism in those pregnancies where acetaminophen was used. They saw it, but when they did the sibling study, what happens when you look at siblings, they're so closely matched genetically, from environmental perspective, and also there's recall bias. I mean, we don't really know, these women were interviewed for acetaminophen use, and, so there may be some type of recall bias of whether they use Tylenol in either pregnancy or both pregnancies. But when you have siblings, they're so closely matched, you can't really rely on those results. So I would actually contend that Paul Offit is wrong, which he is a lot of the time. Especially if he errs towards using a pharmaceutical rather than against using a pharmaceutical. And I think that the precautionary principle is do not use Tylenol in pregnancy. And it's even worse if you look at the perinatal period. Once the cord is clamped and then after the cord is clamped is much worse regarding Tylenol exposure as opposed to during pregnancy.
But Paul Offit also, he should know better because actually Tylenol itself says you shouldn't use Tylenol during pregnancy.
It does. They have stated it clearly over and over again that you do not use acetaminophen during pregnancy. And pregnancy used to be sort of this sacred time period where medicine was verboten, where you just didn't You didn't medicate, you didn't vaccinate. You know, if you had something like a fever, you would treat it naturally. If you had any type of infection, you would treat it naturally and let it run its course, rather than putting things like antibiotics and nonsteroidal anti-inflammatory drugs or vaccines. But, you know, now that has become the new frontier for the pharmaceutical industry. And, you know, we're actually seeing pregnancy parameters get worse, not better.
Is the science department, Children's Health Service, are you doing anything with acetaminophen?
We are. There are two different things that we're looking at. One is we're looking at the Florida Medicaid database in order to look at diagnoses where acetaminophen use would be recommended. It's really difficult to do any type of study on, you know, any type of retrospective or epidemiological study on the use of acetaminophen, because it's not a part of the patient's record. They go home, they take Tylenol, they take generic acetaminophen, and it's never written down. So the best that we can do is to look at diagnoses where acetaminophen use would be appropriate, like fevers, teething pain, earaches, respiratory infection, sore throat, headache, things like that, where that is coded. And what we're seeing is that when you look at autism diagnoses based on the number of fevers that have been reported prior to the autism diagnosis, then for males and females, females fare a little bit worse, but for males and females, if they have one fever diagnosis where, you know, presumably they could use acetaminophen, the risk is between 1.5 and 1.7. If they have two fever diagnoses before that autism diagnosis, it's between 2 and 2.5. And then it goes up precipitously. So children that have 4 different fever diagnoses in their medical records where presumably they would use Tylenol, then they are much, much greater risk of having an autism diagnosis. And it's not just fever, it's any type of surrogate, fever, earache, respiratory infection, whatever. We're seeing an increased risk of an autism diagnosis. So it's not that they're getting fevers, it's that they're getting some type of indication where they would use Tylenol or a generic.
So I've got a question for you.
Yes.
So for parents like me, who we gave our children Tylenol because the doctor told us to, and also they got infections, so they got more than the normal person, the unvaxxed. So when we saw, let's take Billy, he has his Tylenol, he goes in the morning, then he has a massive seizure, and then that's his life over. It's the Tylenol and the vaccine, just the Tylenol. What do we know what actually caused Billy's regression?
It's really both, because, you know, in order for Tylenol to do damage inside the brain, then the pathway responsible for reduction of Tylenol, it's called an oxidative pathway, has to already be overtaxed. So you add that vaccine. When you add that vaccine in, that is causing a massive amount of oxidative stress that takes away the reserves of glutathione that would normally also detoxify Tylenol. So, you know, when these pathways are overstressed, then Tylenol breaks down, it metabolizes into a toxic product called NAPQI, that accumulates in the brain, and then that causes the damage. Now, if you look at the perfect storm for autism, it's kind of like the fire triangle. Remember the fire triangle from elementary school? You need oxygen, an ignition source, and you need fuel in order to make a fire. Well, in order to make autism in this context, and there are other things besides Tylenol that would fit into this, you need oxidative stress from a vaccine, you need Tylenol use, and then you need the genetic susceptibility. You need all 3 components in order to get an autism diagnosis. Now, when that oxidative stress goes up and it's higher and higher and higher, which we are looking at the extremes of vaccination schedules right now, then the threshold for genetic susceptibility gets lower and lower and lower. So it's more and more children that are genetically susceptible to get an autism diagnosis, and that's why we see it going up.
Right, 131 or whatever the number is, that's an awful lot of autism genetic susceptibility going on around here. All right, so just going back to the timeline for a second. So Yesterday, I went to go food shop with Billy, and as I walked into this huge supermarket, HEB in Texas
Right.
is huge, there was a massive display promoting Tylenol. It was unbelievable. Get your Tylenol now. It's all on offer. Get it, get it, get it. So it's that. And then on top of that, Brian, we have pregnant women saying they don't care about Trump and screw you and all that kind of stuff. I'm going to take time off my baby. We've got a clip of that. Let's have a look at it right now, and then you want your comment.
Uncontrolled fevers in pregnancy pose an increased risk of miscarriage, of neural developmental defects. Knowing what I know about the risks of Tylenol in pregnancy versus the risks of an uncontrolled fever, I would take Tylenol again in this pregnancy.
Absolutely maddening. Why would you do that? Again, the precautionary principle would be that you would avoid a medication that carries a risk of having a child with autism or neurodevelopmental disability or ADHD. Then do not do it. I see so many of these people and they're making a political statement. Why would you do that to your baby? Why would you do that to your unborn child? Just because the reason, their motivation behind doing it is Trump said not to do this, and so therefore I'm going to rebel against Trump because I have Trump derangement syndrome or whatever. But there is significant evidence using Tylenol in pregnancy. And like I said before, Polly, it gets worse after the cord is clamped. And so baby Tylenol, that is, they did not have that as a part of their press release, but President Trump emphasized that during the press conference. Do not give baby Tylenol to babies. It is dangerous. And when you do it, especially in a context of oxidative stress, like getting a vaccine, again, you're creating the perfect storm for autism.
Any more on acetaminophen, or should we move on to NIH funding?
Let's go ahead and move on to NIH funding. We are doing more work on acetaminophen. And so as the research that's being done by the CHD science team is available, we'll make sure that it gets out on CHD TV.
Marvelous. Right, NIH funding. What is your take on it's $50 million on autism cause studies? Expert says US should focus on treatments.
This is so disappointing. This came out as a part of what was called the Autism Data Science Initiative. And they had their original call for proposals in early May of 2025. The proposals were due at the end of May 2025. They had 250 proposals that were submitted. They awarded money to 13 different grantees. And these grantees are the same old. They're basically kicking the can down the road, and they're looking at the same genetic factors. There are a few that actually mention environmental components, environmental risk. Nobody, and if you bring up the list of grantees and what they're known for, you have things like prenatal and postnatal air pollution, pesticide exposures, hazardous chemicals in maternal work environments. None of these mention vaccines or vaccine components, not a one. And things that are insulting like parental age. I mean, where have we heard this before? Let's blame the parents. Or prenatal valproic acid. Why are we going back to valproic acid? We know it's related to autism. You don't have to do that study. It's a big waste of time. And then prenatal fever and maternal infection, we already know maternal immune activation is a key feature. And so it does not need to be studied, but absolutely no mention of vaccines, no mention of vaccine components, mercury or aluminum, no mention regarding glyphosate exposure, which is ubiquitous in society right now. So this is an affront to me. This is absolutely an affront. This is $50 million that's worse than being flushed down the toilet. It is being waved in the face of parents who are struggling with these children and need to know what causes it so they can stop the epidemic. This is not the way to stop an epidemic.
So why would Bobby authorize this? I wonder if it's this. Does he have to cross all these things off to say, okay, that's out the way. We know it's not that. So let's go to this. I don't know. I don't understand it. He knows what causes autism.
Well, this looks like there wasn't enough change at the rank and file level at the National Institutes of Health in order to properly screen these proposals. The way that these proposals are screened is that distinguished researchers, I mean, the researchers that have been doing the same thing for a long period of time, basically decided who was going to get grant funding. So they bring in these distinguished researchers, they put them in a room, they rank all the proposals, they give them a score, and those that get the highest scores will win. So it's an old boy club. They need to break up the old boy club of individuals that are, ranking these proposals. And the decision is not made at the highest levels. It should have been made at the highest levels. And this clearly was not, because I could not see Secretary Kennedy ever funding these individuals who have gotten NIH funding for a long, long period of time and have found zip, zero, nothing, nada, zilch. They have found nothing, but we're giving these same individuals the same money. Some of this funding is going to Drexel University. Drexel University right now is funding Diana Schendel. Diana Schendel was complicit in the federal indictment of Paul Thorson. Diana Schendel and Paul Thorson were lovers at the time. I don't even know if they still have this ongoing love relationship. Diana Schendel was Paul Thorson's supervisor at the CDC and was approving all the invoices, including the invoices where Paul Thorson embezzled money. It was basically a money laundering scheme. The federal indictment does say that there were other individuals that were unnamed that were involved. I mean, clearly, if you're looking at who was involved in this, why don't we look at Schendel, because she was Thorson's lover throughout this time period. And not only did Thorson go into hiding in Denmark, but at the same time, Schendel, after this federal indictment came down, she immigrated to Denmark and only very recently has come back to the United States. So why are we giving the same people money that basically defrauded the government?
Oh, it's not like CHD to have lover news on, but so that's a fact. They were lovers.
They were. I mean, we have the email traffic. They use CDC email addresses for their love notes and, for all this salacious stuff that was going on under the watchful eye of Colleen Boyle, who was in charge of the vaccine autism fraud, was in charge of the Agent Orange fraud. I mean, they're looking the other way so they can indemnify vaccines from the autism epidemic. And to me, anybody that has half a brain cell, this is an affront to them, that they would be getting more NIH money for an institution that would dare hire and fund Diana Schendel.
Are they all going to go to jail one day? Is that actually going to happen? Because it's so exhausting watching all these people that should be in jail and they never seem to go to jail.
They need to go to jail. And I know where the bodies are buried. I have all the FOIA documents. The FOIA documents are available. I'm going to make them publicly available on a website so everybody can see this. You bet. I am working, to the grindstone to make sure that the individuals that were responsible for these fraud are held to account. Yes, they should go to jail. And if I have anything to do with it, yes, they will go to jail. Excellent.
Anything else on NIH funding?
No, I think that's about it. But again, F minus. We need to do better.
Well, I'm very excited that you're on top of it all. It makes us very hopeful. Right, the next one is undermining vaccine confidence. So,
is that a bad thing?
Well, 12 ways RFK Jr. has undercut vaccine confidence as health secretary. Oh, please, this will take 2 seconds, trust me. Let's go through. These are marvelous. Kennedy encouraged measles vaccine but opposes mandates. Well, I don't know that he encourages the measles vaccine. He just said you can have it if you don't want the MMR.
One of the things that we've shown is that the measles vaccine prevents the measles, but I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing. I mean, if you look at the mortality of the MMR vaccine versus the mortality of measles, many more people, about 10 times as many people have died from the MMR vaccine in the past 20 years. Actually, it would be more like 30 times. than have actually died from quote unquote the measles. And I would contend that the deaths that are counting as measles death were not measles deaths at all. They were hospital error. They were clear cases of medical malpractice. The families are pursuing legal actions against these medical providers. For the two little girls that died in Seminole, Texas. The MMR, yeah, it prevents the measles. You can take the MMR and you can lower your chances of getting the measles. Does it prevent mortality? No, definitely not.
Ben Edwards, and you're a shining example of how if you take the MMR, you potentially can get measles as well. So it doesn't work. It's useless.
It doesn't. No. I'm an example here. 3 MMR vaccines over my lifetime, and I still got the measles. Same with Ben.
Kennedy says the public shouldn't be taking his medical advice. It's perfectly normal comment to make. I think that's absolutely correct. I think that's very honest of him, don't you? Fine.
Everything that he has said emphasizes the local practitioner and the doctors that are boots on the ground that know you, know your case, know your child, know your family. And it also emphasizes the parents as being the best experts. The parents are the ones that are spending 24/7 with their children, with their families. And so parents have a brain. Parents can use their brain. Parents can get educated. None of this is rocket science. All Secretary Kennedy is doing is he's putting the power locally with the parents, with their practitioners, in order to make the best decisions for the families. What's so bad about that?
Right. He's saying, here's my information, do your own research. Let's look at number 3. Kennedy advocates for placebo-controlled vaccine trials. Yes, thank you.
They haven't been done on, really any of the vaccines in this schedule, especially the MMR vaccine. I mean, the MMR vaccine right now, we do not know how much virus they're actually putting in for the M, or the R, measles, mumps, or rubella. We know they started a practice called overfilling in 1999. So when you look at the package insert, Polly, it tells you the minimum amount of virus that's in the vaccine, but it never tells you the maximum amount of virus. And it is a level of virus I'm sure of, reading the court documents from the Kraling-Quitam case against Merck. Nobody knows, except for Merck, how much virus is being put into these vials, but we know that it's higher than what's ever been appropriately safety tested. So if you want to participate in a grand medical experiment, go ahead, get the MMR.
Yeah, and people don't understand that it's not tested. So just for those that really don't understand, it's not tested. It's tested against another vaccine.
Correct. Even when it was tested, which it's never been tested at all at these levels, it was tested against another vaccine. It was tested against MMR1. MMR2 was validated against MMR1.
Kennedy challenges eligibility rules for COVID vaccines. Thank you.
We need to challenge, everything. We need to put settled science to bed, because science is never settled, and you should always be asking the question, what is this? Why am I putting this in my body? Will it actually prevent an infection? What are the risks associated? What are the benefits associated with it? I dare say that I wouldn't recommend anybody get a COVID shot or get even in the same room with a COVID shot at any particular time period. But Secretary Kennedy is basically raising the question and giving us a choice.
Kennedy fires experts on CDC vaccine panel and selects his own replacements. Oh, thank you for doing that, Secretary Kennedy. I'm behind you 100%.
Well, who he fired were individuals that had declared conflicts of interest with the pharmaceutical industry, and who were, at the table with the possibility that they could vote and make a decision that would make them money directly. We know that Paul Offit did that. He voted for the rotavirus vaccine, knowing that he had a rotavirus vaccine under development, the Rototech vaccine, that would come in and would capture a significant portion of the market. And quite frankly, he voted himself rich. I mean, there's no way, shape, or form around that. And so by eliminating this particular conflict of interest, you have individuals on that particular committee now that can make good scientific choices based on the evidence. Is the committee perfect? No, not anywhere close to being perfect, but this is a step in the right direction.
Kennedy suggests updated international health regulations will result in global medical surveillance.
I can't agree with him more regarding the surveillance state. We need to make sure that we're maintaining autonomy as the United States. We're maintaining our own civil liberties and freedoms. I don't, my medical record is not it's not a part of the public record. My family's medical record is not a part of the public record. It is our own private information. It can be used to discriminate against you. It can be used in order to manipulate the media and manipulate advertising choices. We're seeing this thing happen already. So we need to be vigilant. We need to be guarding our own information. And so, when the Secretary of HHS says that, no, we're not going to participate in this internationally, then that does my heart good, because I feel like he's protecting the privacy of my family.
Amazing. Next one, please. So far, so good. Kennedy repeals a Biden-era vaccination incentive for hospitals. Thank you again.
Exactly. I mean, how is this a bad thing?
They're all bad.
We're taking away the financial incentive of hospitals and medical providers to vaccinate individuals. So again, we can focus the decision on the appropriate decision makers, the people that are going to be ingesting this substance in their body. When you take out those conflicts of interest, everybody wins. Everybody wins, and you get the best choices for the individuals that are, and we're protecting bodily autonomy at the same time. So many of these rights were infringed during COVID-19. Masking, social distancing, hunkering down in homes, taking untested gene therapies, remdesivir, Paxlovid, monopulvonir, all of these things that upset bodily autonomy, and were really, financial incentives were given to hospital companies, given to medical providers to get us to take these drugs, regardless of whether they were safe or effective.
Kennedy cuts funding for mRNA vaccine development. As if, again, it's almost laughable, all this, because so far we agree with absolutely everything he's done, but they're saying this is horrific and he should be impeached immediately.
Well, there are so many lines of evidence showing how bad this technology is for your body. When you have exogenous RNA in your cells, it suppresses your innate immune system. So you know what? People that got the COVID shot repeatedly were getting sicker. And the Cleveland Clinic study did show the more boosters you got, the more liable you were at getting a repeat round of a COVID infection. They were getting more and more COVID infections the more boosters they got, which was counterintuitive. I mean, if people knew this, if they were confronted with the reality of this, they wouldn't have gotten the COVID shot in the first place. And so, by cutting funding for this technology, we're stepping back and we're saying, let's take a look at the technology as a whole. Let's see what it does to the human body. Let's do long-term testing before we rush to judgment. The technology should have never been brought to the forefront from the very, very beginning for, this platform for warp speed. I'm sorry that, people declare warp speed this huge success. It was not. It was an abysmal failure, and we're paying for it.
Kennedy criticizes the CDC's pandemic response after a deadly shooting at the agency.
Unfortunately, this shooting happened, and the shooting needs to be taken in the context of, a very, very mentally unstable individual who, unfortunately shot and killed a security guard. Science moves forward regardless of this happening. We cannot have a knee-jerk reaction of, well, this was somebody that was, a COVID anti-vaxxer. And so therefore, because they're deranged, then the vaccine must be good. The logical fallacies are myriad when you look at that type of judgment. The COVID vaccine was bad. It caused more vaccine reactions than the rest of the entire vaccine schedule combined over the 32-year history of tracking of VAERS. So we know it's bad. And so we need to look at the pandemic response through that lens, not through the lens of a shooting.
Kennedy fires the CDC director. Excellent.
I have a beef to pick with Susan Monterez. Susan Monterez withheld information for treating measles infections in Texas. She was on the phone, basically paying lip service to Dr. Ben Edwards. Dr. Ben Edwards and her were communicating on the phone, and everything that she told him that she would do, she did not do. Instead of promoting treatment for measles in Texas, they cut funding for treatment of measles in West Texas, along with Dimitri Daskalakis, the head of the National Center for Influenza and Respiratory Diseases. They made sure that funding was cut. And so therefore, they left these individuals in Seminole, Texas to fend for themselves. And it was up to the good graces of people like Dr. Ben Edwards, Dr. Richard Bartlett, who were actually treating measles cases on the ground, using their own money to airlift vitamin A and vitamin C to Seminole, Texas.
CDC seeks to investigate link between vaccines and autism. How is that bad? It's like,
okay. The cringeworthy headlines of, vaccines don't cause autism that are still on the CDC website to this day. It's horrible. It's like, take it down, take it down, take it down. It's still there. But, they need to look at this thing that has been so understudied, that has been, been so many of these false declarations regarding, the level of study, the level of testing of vaccines, in light of the autism epidemic. If anything, the body of evidence shows that, number one, the CDC is not capable of studying this on their own. They just produce fraudulent studies. And the independent researchers are definitively showing a link between vaccines and autism if you look at the independent studies that have tackled this particular issue. So, yeah, we need to study it. Not only do we need to study it, we need to start compensating it, because, to my mind, there has been a link that has been shown. Even the National Vaccine Injury Compensation Program has conceded in several cases that there is a link, and so we need to compensate these individuals.
Absolutely. And the last one, RFK Jr. makes false claims about vaccines and autism at acetaminophen event.
Acetaminophen is right there in the crosshairs. It's something that we're looking at Children's Health Defense. This is the perfect storm. You look at the combination of acetaminophen use, especially in conjunction with vaccinations, which has, for the longest period of time, has just been sort of this unwritten standard of care. Oh, well, use baby Tylenol. You get a vaccine, your kid's running a fever. They even used to recommend that you front load the vaccine with Tylenol. You want your baby to be okay, give them Tylenol before the vaccination appointment, and it's been heard over and over and over again. And so, yeah, we need to look at this in earnest. We need to not only investigate vaccines, Tylenol, and autism, but we need to start compensating these cases.
That was wonderful, you going through that. Now, just one more thing. You have a new paper on vaccines and chronic infections. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, we have a paper that is going to be coming out, and I'll make sure that CHD TV is up to date. We look at a selected cohort of individuals where we followed them from birth up through 4 years of age. So, we follow them their first 4 years of life. So that's when the plurality of vaccines are given as a part of the CDC vaccine schedule. We looked at vaccinated individuals, we looked at unvaccinated individuals, and the vaccinated kids are getting more chronic infections. They're getting over and over and over again ear infections, respiratory infections, gastrointestinal infections, and we see this sinusitis time and time again in the vaccinated. We know that the more they get vaccines, the more they're suppressing their innate immune system, which is essential for fighting off these infections.
It is. Well, that's the end of our amazing show, but it is your show, so I'll let you close it. Just to remind our viewers that I will be in England this Sunday and the following Sunday seeing my fam, and Michael Caine's going to take over with Mary.
Well, Polly is taking a much deserved break. Of course, we will miss her, but we want, for her sanity and for our benefit, for her to take a break so she can come back refreshed from the UK. Take a break. Don't think about CHD TV. Just enjoy your family. And everybody, thank you for joining us for this October 3rd episode of Doctors and Scientists. You saw it right here at CHD TV.
My name is Chanda Adkins.
You are a pharmacist.
I am a pharmacist in West Virginia. I'm a licensed pharmacist, yes.
And how long have you been a pharmacist for?
So I went to West Virginia University. I graduated in 2005 and completed a pharmacy practice residency in 2007 and through 2008.
So you were pretty much big pharma.
Oh yeah, I was actually the president in pharmacy school of our American Student Pharmacist Association. Did community service projects that way and served as a secretary for a sorority. Yeah, so anything coming and going, I helped to orchestrate lunches with drug reps from companies trying to recruit us to come to work. So I don't want to say I was big pharma, but I would say that I was essentially bureaucratically involved with the school in all things and processes and what I thought was doing good for the sake of the community and other students, getting them information about employment. So
I heard about these lunches. People talk about them a lot. So these big pharma reps come in.
They do.
And they wine and dine you, if you like, and try and sell you drugs for you to sell?
So they use it like as educational pieces. We would have not just big pharma, we would have just companies come in and give us food, and oftentimes that's when we would have a break. And so in their defense, we would have time to sit and listen, and they would give us food, just like they do here at the Capitol where we're at today. You know, they bring food and that catches your time to sit down, and then you oftentimes listen. So they use that as a ploy to catch your time, and while you ate, they would speak. And yeah, I went to several dinners where drug companies would sponsor a dinner at a really nice restaurant, and they would have someone come to educate us on maybe the latest and greatest drug out. And yeah, I sure did eat a lot of food that was provided from drug companies.
So you took some, it's Hep B really that we want to talk about today, but just tell people in those days, what was your mindset on vaccinations?
So in pharmacy school, it wasn't like we had a really big section of our curriculum just about vaccines. We had immunology, and we had a lot of things that we would talk about. It was never really discussed. I remember when we were in pharmacy school at that time in West Virginia, the layout of the land was pharmacists did not vaccinate. It was nurses, physicians. So I remember being really glad as a pharmacist I didn't have to touch people in that way. I was more on the realm of recommendations, and you would see a pharmacist at Walgreens, they were touching pills and bottles, or on the phone, or in hospitals they were dispensing meds. So we were more dispensing in that way, and we never touched people. So I was really glad that I really never had to lay my hands on people in like a physician type of way, if that makes sense. So when I was presented with, you now need the hepatitis B vaccine in 2003, 2004, I was taken back because I thought, why would I need the hepatitis B vaccine? I don't really touch people. We are in more of the dispensary type of role, and even in the clinical role, we're more using our minds and writing recommendations. We're not physically. So how would I be at risk to get Hep B? But it was presented that I needed titers drawn for several things and I should just get a Hep B vaccine, as if it was just like taking a Fruity Pebble multivitamin.
All right, so how many did you take?
So it's been many years ago. I can't remember if it was the second or the third booster, but it was definitely after the subsequent dose. It was a booster that my injury took place. So I had actually graduated pharmacy school, so I know it definitely wasn't the initial booster that I had taken. But even when I first took the first vaccine, there was never a question as to what my current health state was. I could have been in active chemo. No one would have known. No one knew a family history. No one asked if I'd ever had a vaccine reaction. There was no discussion. It was show up, receive the vaccine, and I was sent home. So on the subsequent dose of a booster, it wasn't immediate, and I was experiencing some pain that was horrendous in the left side of my brain on my eye. And I went to the eye doctor first, who said to take some ibuprofen. The pain was so unbearable, I then saw 3 specialists, retina, orbital, cornea, who could not figure out what was wrong with me, other than I had optic nerve inflammation at that time. And I was sent to a neuro-ophthalmologist at a major medical university at that point because they couldn't provide care.
And what made you think it was a vaccine though?
Well, it's really funny because as mothers and we take our kids to the pediatrician, I had no idea what was wrong with me. So when I go to this major medical center and I see an MD, a neuro-ophthalmologist, he says she needs a brain MRI at that moment to see the optic nerve and to see the brain. And at that time I had no lesions. There was nothing triggering anything other than my optic nerve was inflamed. And he looked, a physician with an MD, one of the only neuro-ophthalmologists in the state, I think he was the only neuro-ophthalmologist in the state, looked at me and said, he said, what have you done recently? Because what would have caused this inflammation? Have you been out of the country? No. Have you been bit by a mosquito? No. Have you recently had the hepatitis B vaccine? And I was like, wait, what? Yes. He said, yeah, I'm seeing this a lot in my practice. People are receiving the hepatitis B vaccine, and then we oftentimes see optic neuritis. And at that point in time, you have to understand, I had an eye patch on. It was like, I guess the way people with cataracts describe it, the vision was clouded by this massive cloud, and I was just blind. And so, I didn't have lesions on the brain at that time, so the recommendation was IV steroids. And now I'm a pharmacist, mind you, and so I'm thinking, why would you want to destroy my bones? Why do you want to put 20 pounds of fluid on me with IV steroids? They wanted the inflammation down, so I said, what's the alternative to that? It's the first time I've ever said, what's the alternative? He said, you can allow this to, it will become, not inflamed anymore, but it's going to take a while. It could take 8 weeks. And that's what I opted for. I said, you're not going to stick a needle in me again. And so I didn't want the steroids. He said, if you did not take the steroids, though, if we were not able to do this, your risk of having multiple sclerosis will increase 50% fold over the next 10 years. But I said, you're going to destroy my immune system and my bones, because I'm a pharmacist and I know what corticosteroids do. And we're talking about IV corticosteroids, not just a Medrol dose pack if we're just, acutely sick and we need a quick 2 or 3 days of anti-inflammatories because maybe we have bronchitis or our lungs are inflamed. They wanted to put me in the hospital for 4 to 5 days on IV steroids. And if you've ever seen people maybe who have gone through cancer or chemo, what that does to them. Just destroys their bones, and it destroys their immune systems, and it just really pulls a lot of fluid. And I was a young woman, single, with her career starting, and I was just picturing myself looking like this ballooned, water-filled balloon, essentially, for what? If this is going to heal on its own, it was at that time I said, I'm going to let it heal on its own. And it was about 8 years later I was diagnosed with MS.
Yeah, what were the symptoms?
At first I thought I had a pinched nerve because I like to work out, and I thought I had a pinched nerve based on some tingling in my feet. And you have to understand, from the time that vaccine injury happened, my immune system was completely destroyed. So after the vaccine injury, before even the MS came about, I actually went through melanoma, and I had a tumor. So the vaccine injury occurred. 2 years later, I was pregnant with my daughter, and a melanoma tumor was discovered. And I went through surgery to remove that, and I went through 4 years of PET scans to ensure that it was not in my lymph nodes. the worst part. It's like my immune system was destroyed and no one could tell me how to make it better. And so I wanted to have another baby. And if you've ever had a doctor, and I know I've watched your interviews, when someone says, the doctor said you don't have cancer, there's no evidence, go have another baby. It was in December of 2010. He said, go have a baby and I'll see you next December. And I'm like, I had all my adoption paperwork. I was too afraid to have another baby because when you have a baby, your immune system is essentially shut down. And we know, how do you fight things if your immune system is cut off? Your immune system is cut off so you don't reject your baby. And so pregnant people are in a very, what is the word I want to say? It's fragile state. Your immune system has to be in tip-top shape so it doesn't reject your baby, but yet you can fight things. And mine was dysfunctional at that time. And so instead of fighting my baby, melanoma occurred. And it wasn't just a mole, it wasn't a skin cancer. This was a tumor. It was a tumor that needed to be removed and it required surgery. And so after I went through the PET scans, and I did have a baby, I had a beautiful baby boy. A year later, I had another PET scan and I didn't have cancer. But for 4 years, I went through subsequent PET scans and I was nursing and had to deal with that. So, and that's okay. It happened. And then I also had to have, so it wasn't long after I had another tumor removed that was benign. My immune system was destroyed, and that's the gist of it. My immune system was completely destroyed. I had another benign tumor removed out of my right arm, and it's still on my nerve in my right arm. And so I actually had a neurosurgeon from Johns Hopkins remove that, and he did a beautiful job, and I still have function in my right arm. But it was benign, and now I have MS, and I have 2 other autoimmune conditions that I battle daily. So I have 3 autoimmune conditions. The chronic MS is never going away, and neither are the other 2. And it's a battle every day.
We hear this a lot from Hep B.
Yes.
People who took a series of Hep B in the medical profession particularly.
Yes.
This kind of stories. And what about your daughter? Or did you vaccinate?
So I try to keep a lot of these things private. I would say that in my family, after my injury, it's a journey for everybody. You just don't overnight all understand. I was trained in a way to not believe that that's what it could be. It was definitely a journey for me, and even with my children over time. I don't really talk about their medical status, but I can tell you that I have one child that's had vaccines more than the other, and the one that has less than the other is by far healthier than the child with or without. But I can tell you there was a moment in our family, because I have a nephew who's been vaccine injured and was severely injured. And so it's a journey for everybody, and there's a lot of grace for people because we know it doesn't always happen overnight. And so, yes, it is now. My family and my children are old enough to know, and we talk about it a lot. But I served in the legislature in 2018 here at West Virginia, and they had an MS walk actually here in Charleston where we're at. And I went to that MS walk and they asked me to speak. And I got to visit with some of the people there. There are so many people with my story, it makes me sick. And so medical professionals, EMS workers, people that, a girl who went to work at a prison, they asked her to receive the hepatitis B vaccine, and it wasn't years later, like myself who developed MS, she received a hepatitis B vaccine and within a month was diagnosed with MS. So this is not uncommon. This is so common, all I could do was share the knowledge that I had at the MS walk.
And we're now seeing from the COVID shots, young girls particularly, are in their early 20s being diagnosed with MS.
So sad.
COVID shot. Yeah, it's terrific.
So, you think about the way the science works with vaccines and the inflammation in the body. And serving in the legislature, I had a lot of backlash. I think between being a pharmacist and during the oxycodone hype and what I dealt with there and the threats and what was said, and then being in the legislature and standing for what I stand for, you couldn't say anything about me that I've already had said. And so I will 100% trust and believe that these young girls are having this happen. I believe anything that they say. And this is why so many, our group, West Virginians for Health Freedom, tried to work with nursing groups here in the state to stop the mandates, because I don't want people to experience my story. And I know this is what's happening. The inflammation is, oftentimes we are genetically prone to certain diseases. I may be even genetically prone to Huntington's disease. I don't know. If I do anything else to inflame my system, I don't know what gene I'm gonna trigger and flip on. You know, it could have been ALS, it could have been something. But you know, they're going to write and say, well, at that time it was Delegate Adkins or Dr. Chanda Adkins. She says that the vaccine caused the MS. Well, I could say that, but I could say the vaccine was a catalyst for a lot of inflammation that my body experienced, which set my immune system into a rage of fury that caused a lot of health issues. And yes, I did, and the end result was MS, and that is what I'm now chronically dealing with.
Are there any, not that we're giving out any medical advice, but is there any hope for those with MS? Have you found things that alleviate and help?
Yeah, so I would say that anybody with MS, my story is not their story. We all know that. But one of the first things that I did was I went on a medication because I thought, okay, I was working and I really wanted to be able to work because I loved my job. And now I have this new information to try to put it out there and teach people. So I think there is hope. I think you have to find what works for you. For me, it was to stop working, and now I don't take any medications for my MS. I was able to get off of those shots, and I was able to do it. I quit working, and now I have such a disciplined, regimented schedule between exercise and diet and natural therapies, from acupuncture to massage therapy to chiropractic care. So many great things that, you know, I have providers that see it for what it is and help take care of me.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Is there anything else you want to tell the people?
No, I just want people to be encouraged, because when I think about like the things that have happened to me, and every day I don't feel good, but that you can't live in that. I don't want people to live in that, because if we don't talk and tell our story, which the first time you were in West Virginia, I was afraid. I was so afraid to tell my story. I was so afraid of someone at my job firing me, because I loved my job, because I love people and I want to help people. And so I just don't want, I want people, yes, there's so many horrible things that have happened to people, but if you can turn it for the good and save somebody else or help somebody else, it's the only reason why I wanted to tell my story, because I want someone to know that you don't have to fall in line. I had to fall in line in a legislature, and when I didn't, they were on me. It's like my whole life, you know, some sort of bureaucracy or some sort of forces always wanted me to fall in line. We don't have to fall in line. We don't have to. There are ways. And if you stand up and tell your story, I think the greatest thing we could ever do as mothers and as daughters, as sisters, as women, is tell our story. Because I see a lot of people out there that are afraid, and I don't want to be afraid anymore.